Hey everybody, welcome to the I303 podcast. I'm your host, David Prieto. We're here, we talk about interesting insights and oddball opinions from the perspective of an IO. Today I have someone very interesting with me. We have Ellie Hoekman. Ellie's a recruitment, talent acquisition, and assessment specialist, and she's going to share her insights with us today. So with that said, Ellie, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you so you can tell us about your origin story.
Yes, absolutely, David. Thank you so much for having me. It's so cool to be on your podcast after you
Yeah.
were on mine. So for those who do not know me, I am, like David said, my background is in recruiting, talent acquisition, and a little bit of assessments. And now I work as a career coach, and I specifically work with IO psychology professionals, helping them get roles in the field. And when I started my career in recruiting, I saw that there was a lot of phenomenal people who were unfortunately putting their foots in their mouths while they were speaking out loud, and that made me sad. And so I started career coaching to help folks understand how to be better interviewers, how to talk about themselves a little bit more effectively. And that also, in my recruiting career, I really loved whenever I got to work with data. I thought it was so fun and interesting and exciting. And so I thought I'm going to be a data analyst. And I thought that that title would be really sexy. I thought it'd be really cool to tell people I was a data analyst. So I started looking at data analyst certifications and degrees. And that was when I stumbled across IO. And I felt like that was a perfect blend of what I wanted to do, which was a little more data focus with still the HR kind of psychology background that I had already had and been doing. And my bachelor's was in psychology as well. And so then I got actually a role as a people analyst for a while, which was everything that I wanted on paper. Amazing salary, awesome boss, great team, very strong organization with a great mission that I totally believed in. But I was bored. I was bored out of my mind.
Yeah.
And I missed the career coaching. I missed the interviewing. I missed talking to people. And so that was also around when I started my career coaching business, which started as a side hustle and is now my full-time gig. I also just a little bit over a year ago is when I started specializing in working with individuals in IO psychology, which is just a perfect blend of my background and what I can help other people do. And so that's how we got to where we are today. So that is the origin story for me.
There you go. And one of the things I really like is I wish, so I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but when I was in grad school, I wish somebody like you would have come across to help me get into that first role. So when
Mm-hmm.
I was when I was getting ready to graduate, it was just kind of push you out. Good luck.
Mm-hmm.
Here's
Yep.
everything you learned, and that was kind of it. So
Mm-hmm.
no, there was no guidance, no
I
coaching, nothing we can do to kind of help us make that transition into the real world.
I hear that a lot. I
Yeah.
hear that a lot of like, I needed you between
Yeah.
grad school and
Yeah.
my first career.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm here now.
Yeah. There you go. So everybody strongly recommend Ellie's great.
Thank
So
you.
with that, we have so hiring, even in internships, professional roles, even higher level manager, executive roles, there is still this, from my experience, lack of consistency when it comes to hiring. I worked in tech for a little bit, so one of the things we would hear is, well, if I can't have a beer with a person, I don't know if I don't work with them. Or if I can't, go to lunch with them. If I can't have a coffee with a person, I don't know if they want to have them on my team. There are still some individuals who believe 100% that that is the ultimate way to determine if we should hire someone and bring them on board. Do you think that's the best way we can go about hiring individuals?
Well, of course I don't, right? I have an IO
Yeah.
degree background, right? And
Yeah.
so my educational background and the experiences that I've had as a recruiter, I have very often found in both of those that when you hire people just based off of how well they vibe with you as a
Yeah.
friend, that does not necessarily make them good at their job.
Yeah.
It makes you believe that
Yeah.
they'll be good at their job, but it's not 2 + 2 = 4. And so no, the answer to that is
Yeah.
no. I do not believe that. However, I can empathize with someone's want to be able to have rapport and a good relationship with who they're going to be working with, because you spend 8 hours a day with these people. And especially if you're in a highly collaborative environment, you want to be able to get along. And so I've had hiring managers have interviewed candidates that I've brought in who were very well qualified, but who had a really hard time actually engaging with the hiring manager themselves. And the hiring manager felt like it would be too difficult to communicate about the things that they would be working on day to day. And so while they might actually do well once they had the work in front of them, their ability to communicate about that
Yeah.
work and to have rapport with their colleagues and make work exciting, they didn't feel confident in their ability to do that. And so I do think that my IO background also says too that maybe that needs to be a competency that we're
Hmm.
actually evaluating on
Yeah.
rather than just like, years of experience and education and technology that they're aware of. So long-winded answer, but no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree 100%. And for me, when I get pushback from hiring managers saying, I've never been a nurse, I've never been a mechanic, I've never been a teacher. So when I work with kind of veteran individuals, they that's the first piece of pushback I get is, you've never done this. How are you going
Mm,
to tell me how to hire someone in this role? And so I'm
mm.
curious to hear, have you gotten that pushback? And if so, do you have any recommendations or best practices on if someone new into the IO field is encountering that pushback, potential ways they can navigate through that?
Mm. I can't say I've ever had that in my own
Okay.
experience. I've
Yeah.
been pretty fortunate with the hiring managers I've worked with. And what I tell them is that if it's going to be a matter of specific expertise that's related to the work that you and your team do, I'm actually going to rely on you for that. But what I
Yeah.
do know and what my expertise is not only hiring for you, but making sure that the people that you do hire will stay. And please,
Gotcha.
let's work together on that. I want to make sure that yes, they do have the technical pieces, and so like that's where I'm going to rely on you. But then at the same time, you have to rely on me to know that the way that we do this hiring process is in your best interest because I want to make sure that you hire somebody who will stay with our company because that's also going to save us money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'm what I also say to my
Yeah.
hiring managers too is something along the lines of like, I'm sure you're not enjoying hiring for somebody right now. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that your team that is down a person is not enjoying the fact that you're down a person. So let's make sure we don't have to do this again. No, I don't always say it exactly like
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
that's the vibe I'm trying to get out with my hiring managers.
There you go. And yeah, so for me, when I have navigated those kind of experiences in the past, to your point, I try to draw that bridge where it's okay, you're the expert in the field. You are,
Yes.
the individual who has X number of years in this field. As an IO, what we try to do is take that knowledge, take that content, and figure out how it maps onto a hiring process. So, what are the underlying skills, or what are the underlying competencies? What are the knowledge areas somebody needs to come in with to be able to be successful in, any one of those roles? So and even that, sharing that IOs intuitively, that makes sense to us. But from a hiring
Hmm.
manager perspective, I still get some of the pushback where it's like, what does that mean? What are you trying
Yes.
to tell me? And so here's my go-to analogy that I like to
Yeah.
share. So I'm a big
Yeah.
sports fan. I grew up playing baseball. Wasn't that good. I played through high school, and that was about as far as I got. But here's the analogy I like to share. So I'm a big baseball fan. Let's go Dodgers. They're looking real good this year. That's beside the point though. So Dodgers. If we wanted to hire a new pitcher, would it be better for us to interview that person so they can tell us how good of a pitcher they are? Or would it be better for us to watch them actually pitch? And when I share that insight, that's when it kind of dawns into hiring managers. Okay, well, how would we do that for an accounting role? Or how would we do that for a mechanic role? How would we do that for any role? It's like,
Hmm.
exactly. We share as IOs how to build that structure, how to build that process, and fill it in with the knowledge base or the content of that SME or that subject matter expert. So I think that's where our two fields come together, or
Yeah.
their field and the IO field.
Yeah. I could also see too there though with that analogy of like,
Yep.
yes, we should watch them pitch, but we can't only watch them pitch because what if they're a phenomenal pitcher, but they are a suck on the team's energy and attitude and they're mean and they're nasty and like we as good of a pitcher as they are, we can't have them drag the whole team down because
Yeah.
this is a team sport. Because I think of my ultimate frisbee career and
Okay.
if we have somebody try out for our team who is a phenomenal athlete but is rude and makes us all feel bad, we are not going to put that person on our roster.
Yeah.
And so there I think there's a balance there as well of like we can't just watch them pitch. We also have to, you know, get an understanding of who they are and the values that they operate on and how they communicate, things like that too.
100% I agree. And so with that, in your process of working with hiring managers, so this will be the bread and butter for IOs, but for those who are not in the field, what is the process called? Or if you could walk me through how we identify what are these characteristics needed to be successful, and potentially
Mhm.
how you go about identifying ways to embed that within the hiring process.
Okay, you're really bringing me back to my IO masters here.
Yeah, there you go.
But essentially, it all starts with the job description, which hopefully started with a great job analysis.
There you go.
And so, for those who don't know and aren't
Yep.
aware, essentially, when you write a job description for a role, you start with an analysis of the job, and that is understanding the job, the responsibilities, and the actions that those in that job take. Especially if you do a really good job with your job analysis, you also understand the value of those actions and how that um, impacts the company, whether from a revenue perspective or an employee perspective. Getting a little into the weeds here, but if you do a good job with your job analysis, you have a good understanding of what the role actually entails. And when you have a good understanding of what the role entails, that's then when you can create your acquisition strategy based off of that. And so what you're ultimately doing in a job analysis from a very high level perspective is you're identifying the competencies that
Mhm.
somebody needs to be successful in that role. And so for an example, let's take like a front desk
Yep.
type of person, because that's what I'm recruiting for right now, so that's top of
There you
mind for
go.
me. Let's take like a
Yep.
front desk person, things that they need to have is like the ability to organize, customer service, let's see, communication. And so those are essentially like competencies. And what you would want to do is you want to identify the level of competency that they need to be successful in the role. And so then if you're doing some kind of assessment, or you are planning your interview questions, you want to base it around those skills and competencies. And so that's why I don't recommend asking things like how many hot dogs can fit in a plane or whatever it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
because that's not related to one of the
Yeah.
competencies that's needed in that type of role. And only if, and for the hiring managers that are very
Yeah.
stuck on asking those
Yeah.
thinking
Those
questions, I say,
wonky
okay,
ones. Yeah.
yes, I say, what competency does that evaluate? And is that
Yeah.
important to you? And if
Yeah.
they can make the case that it is, I might allow it, but likely not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's the very high level overview of how it all works. I could also go into more about like what activities you do to perform a job analysis, but I'd have to probably look at my notes
There you go.
from
Yeah.
grad school for that.
Yeah. So two of the questions that I've heard, which never made any sense to me, but they are pretty popular, are one is how many jelly beans fit in an airplane? And the second
Jelly
one
beans.
is
Okay.
why are manhole covers round? I don't know the answer to either one of those, and I bet
Yeah.
not many people do. And so to have individuals embed that as one of their interview questions, I'm thinking, this doesn't make any sense at all. And it could be everything from a front desk to, potentially the chief marketing officer and everything in between. And it's like,
Yeah.
why are we this? So have you had any of those experiences where it's like, this question just does not make any sense? Okay, I don't get it.
Yeah, yeah. Luckily, not in my career have
Okay.
I been required to ask anything like that.
Okay.
I luckily in all of the recruiting opportunities that I've had have worked with very strong recruiting teams that had a better understanding of this idea of assessing competencies.
Yeah.
However, I have had a hiring manager one time ask me like, well, I want to see what happens when they get stumped. I want to see how they
Hmm.
will logic their way out of it. I want
Yeah.
to, and then I've also had a hiring manager too that's like, I think it's funny, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, but like
Well,
let's
yeah.
go into the candidate's shoes. Like that's
Yeah.
going to put a lot of pressure on them. That's going to make them very nervous. And I was actually just having this conversation the other day that being a career coach has made me a better and softer recruiter.
Yeah.
As in I'm much more understanding than I used to be. And so I think about that too with questions like that where we're not assessing a competency. What we're really doing is we're making the candidate very nervous,
Yeah.
and when you're nervous, you just cannot perform at your best. And so I don't think it's a fair assessment of that person when you're intentionally trying to stump them.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And one of the things I've seen is there are still some hiring managers who want to point or ask the question, tell me a time where this didn't go well, or tell me the time where you failed. And to your
Hmm.
point, that
Hmm.
really gets to a candidate's, well, why would I want to share that? Or it gets them nervous and they start to go from rather than kind of that abundance, they're pulling from all their different experience to I'm nervous, I don't know how to answer this, to a really scarcity mindset where now they're zeroing in on, and they may not accurately represent their whole experience. So I
Mm-hmm.
agree 10,000% that I don't know if those kind of questions are necessarily tapping into the full breadth of someone's skill set.
Right, absolutely. And so, I'm actually not too opposed to that question.
Okay.
I'm personally okay with it when hiring managers ask it. However, I usually recommend that they ask it in a different way. So rather than something so negative, like tell me about a time you failed,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would say what you're really trying to get out of there is understanding how people can take action and learn from maybe mistakes that they make. And so, um, I might recommend that they ask something more along the lines of like, tell me about a project that you worked on that didn't go as planned and what you learned from it. And
Yeah.
that way you're setting up the person for success in their answer. And then what I say to my candidates though is that we can't assume that everybody's going to have Ellie Hoekman training. And so it's very possible that they will ask you, tell me about a time you failed. And so what you need to do is change your own mindset of, yes, this was a failure at the time, but it means that I'll never fail again because I learned from it. And
Gotcha.
Daniel Botero, who's my business coach and now my boss, he says there is no fail. You either learned, like the only time you actually fail is if you didn't learn from it. And so if you can change that mindset around in your mind, then hopefully you won't get as nervous if somebody asks you that failure question because to you, failure is just an opportunity to learn. And so hopefully it doesn't make you as nervous.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So when it comes to hiring, talent acquisition, the recruitment process, there are a
Mm-hmm.
couple of different tools that IOs we have at our disposal. One of them are kind of those multiple choice assessments. Others are interviews. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to focus specifically on interviews here.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations from your experience in terms of what kind of questions someone can ask or should ask during a hiring process?
I don't have like I think it might be cool if I had like my five best questions
Yeah,
to ask.
top 10 or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have anything like
Okay.
that though. And I think that's because it really does depend on the job that you're hiring for. And it also depends on the level of interview that it is. So for example, in a phone screening interview versus an in-person interview with the hiring manager or Zoom interview with the hiring manager, yes, your questions are going to look very different. What I try to say typically is phone screen interviews is like this should be kind of mainly like yes or no questions,
Okay.
ideally, just to make sure that everybody's in line. I also sometimes call them like housekeeping questions, such as with the front desk role I'm hiring for right now. I'm making sure that everybody understands that this is a permanent role, not seasonal, and if that's in line with what they're looking for. Or I'm asking about their availability for work shifts and things like that. Like it's all very standard. And then there's two questions in there that are a little bit more robust, I would say,
Hmm.
and that we're going to be analyzing a little bit closer than yes and no. Um, but then the hiring manager interview, hopefully all those housekeeping questions are taken care of. And so we're asking a lot more behavioral questions at that time. Again, all based on the behaviors and competencies that we have identified from the job description. I do typically recommend when we're planning interview questions is to at some point ask about values. I think that you can learn a lot about a person and how they operate when you ask them about their values and what's important to them. But what I also often say to hiring managers too, when they have a values question, is like understand that this is not a right or wrong. This is just to understand who they are. And so I don't typically use a value question as criteria for their assessment, but I do think it can be helpful from a just like an understanding
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
Um,
100%. Oh, go ahead.
what was the initial question? Because there was something else
Yeah.
I wanted to say.
So if you had any recommendations in terms of questions or interview approaches that
Oh,
individuals from the hiring manager
yes.
perspective that they engage in.
Yes. So my other recommendation there is not necessarily about the question itself, but what I like to do before questions, and that is I explain why I'm asking.
Hmm.
So, for example, I would say, let's say the role involves a little bit of sales. I'd say, this role does use a little bit of your sales skills. So tell me a little bit more about some sales experience you have. And I'm just giving them that one sentence almost as a breather and a warm up to what I'm about to ask them and why it's important. And so I try to do that with any question that I'm asking a candidate is I just try to give them a little bit of a why. And that helps them provide a better answer. And I know that some people are thinking like, well, it doesn't like, why do we have to help them provide a better answer? Like if they really know their stuff, then they're going to be able to do just fine. But no, it's helping them communicate what we actually need to know to make the best decisions for ourselves. So I also love the idea of providing a reasoning for your question before you ask it.
100%. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. So I do have some experience working in the public sector. And
Hmm.
there are kind of two sides of the fence on this. What I mean by that is their approach is very structured, where they have certain rules, certain, questions. They have to ask all the same questions to
Yeah.
everybody. One of the pieces of controversy or where the fence kind of splits is should we provide candidates the opportunity to see the questions before the interview? And
Hmm.
if so, how much time should we give them? And so before
Ooh,
I let
yeah.
you know my thoughts, I'm curious
Yeah.
to hear your thoughts. So this kind of is in alignment with kind of that preface before the question. This is going to talk about sales and then the sales question. So this is kind of
Yeah.
just taking that one step further. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts on that?
Mm. My first and initial thought is I think this is a great accessibility tool for those who are maybe neurodivergent. Having their questions beforehand can be very, very helpful. So I love it from that perspective.
Yeah.
Um, I as for like how
Yeah.
quickly before, like I don't know if I have, and mainly because I'm not sure, because I would definitely want to look into kind of like the research
Yeah.
on what the best
Yeah.
methodology is. But I have actually, unfortunately, never been in an organization where we have provided questions beforehand.
Yeah.
However, I think that if I was hiring for my own business, it's probably something I would do because I want to get the best answer possible from my candidates. Um, so yeah, I'm very
Yeah.
curious to hear your thoughts.
So I'm on the same boat as you, where so I'm going to share something a little controversial. I think
Okay.
we should, but with a limited time frame. What I
Okay.
mean by that is by traditional interview processes, by not providing candidates with the questions beforehand, we are, in my opinion, indirectly assessing a competency that may or may not
Mm,
be within the scope of the role itself. Here's what I mean by
yes.
that. We may inadvertently be measuring somebody's ability to think on their feet, or somebody's ability to be spontaneous, somebody's
Hmm.
ability to, you know, be able to, I don't know what the right word is, but to be able to come up with something on the fly.
Yeah.
If that is directly related to the role, maybe we continue going with the interview process the way that it is. But if being able to be, to be able to think on your feet, if that's not a critical aspect of the role, I think we should provide the questions beforehand. To your
Hmm.
point, it provides candidates the opportunity to really sit in and marinate. Okay, this is the question they're asking. Out of all the experience I have, which one is the one that can best address that question? Much like we do in the workplace, we don't all of a sudden say, "Hey, I have this assignment due in the next 5 minutes. Do your absolute best work in these next 5 minutes." We give somebody a time. Here's this question. Here's this assignment. Here's this
Yeah.
project. There's a deadline. Give me the best product you can at that deadline. And
Yeah.
so for me, that's a better, depending on the role, but for most roles, that maps on better to the actual expectations of the role. So I'm a
Mm,
fan
I
of,
love
okay,
that.
let's give it to them ahead of time. Now the
Yeah.
time frame, that can vary. I've seen it
Okay.
as short as 5 minutes, as long as 25, and everything in between. So to your
Okay.
point, I also that'd be a great question to answer as a potential kind of either master's or maybe PhD level,
Yeah.
dissertation. Do we see differences in terms of the amount of time we provide
Yes.
candidates or the robustness, whatever that research might be? I don't know the answer to that, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's so I would want to provide candidates the opportunity to at least see them, jot some
Yeah.
notes down. They can map, okay, what does my experience, what from my experience can I put down for this particular question? And so yeah,
Yeah.
that's where I land.
Because if it's like the day before, then
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
foresee a lot of interviews just being like these scripted. And then at that point, why not just send the questions, have them write their answers?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if they're just going to be all scripted.
Yeah.
I also have this talent of I can read off a script and it sounds like I'm making it up off the top of my head. And it's something that I learned when I was acting in high school. Like
Oh, there
I
you
was
go.
taught how to do that. And so I could come in there and I could have a full script, but it would sound like it's coming off the top of my head and I would sound super smart.
There you
And
go.
so like that would potentially put me like a level up from somebody who's maybe scripted or who didn't plan. I like the idea of it being like maybe 10 minutes
Yeah,
beforehand, just so you could jot down maybe a couple of ideas and kind of
exactly.
jog your memory so you don't have to think of it on the spot. Because another thing that I'm teaching my clients all the time is how to ask for a little bit of time. After you're asked a question, you can say, can I have a second to think about that? Or can I jot down some
Yeah.
notes? Because I want to provide you with a great answer.
Yeah.
And when my candidates did that, when I was a recruiter, I was like, Like I was cheering for
Yeah.
them. I was like, please, like I would
Yeah.
love that. Like I want you to provide the best answer possible. So if you need to take some time, please feel free. And that almost essentially would do that by providing the questions beforehand, but not too far beforehand, would allow that time to kind of reignite that memory. So
Yeah.
love
So,
everything you just said.
yeah, a pro tip that I have that when people come to me because they know I work in HR, do you have any recommendations on how can I stall without making it look like I'm stalling to think of a
Yes.
better response? So, one option, like you shared, is to, can you repeat the question or can you
Yep.
elaborate? Can you, tell me a little bit more? But my go-to is if I'm kind of met with, I don't want to say one that I've been stumped on, but I need a little bit more time.
Mhm.
I ask them if they can repeat the question. And
Yes.
so that just gives me double the time to be able to think, okay, this is what they're asking. What from my experience? So that's kind of a pro tip where if you don't want to make it seem like, you're sitting there stalling, ask them to repeat it.
Yes. Absolutely. And I also say too, like, it is okay to stall. Like it
Yeah.
is okay to ask for a little bit of time. So
Yeah.
I think that like little tips and tricks like that of repeat the question or could you rephrase that
Yeah.
are helpful if you just need that like 1 to 2 seconds. But then I would say maybe even still after you do that, if it's still not coming to you, just ask for time. Like it's
Yeah.
really okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if they're dinging you for that, that's kind of messed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of my personal opinion, but yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. So we do have an elephant in the room,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to IO. I think it's the elephant in everyone's room. So it is AI. And I know that AI is starting to make headway into the recruiting and interview realm. And so I'm not as well versed, but I know there are companies out there where they're basically automating the entire interview process. And
Yes.
to the point where, so from my experience, it was okay, we're going to do in-person interviews, person to person. Then it was person to person via Zoom. Then it was one person speaking into a recording. Now
Mhm.
we're going back to person speaking to another person, but this other person is AI.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what all that entails, but what is your perspective? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Where do you think we're going with all of this that's happening right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you, but I do read a lot of science fiction, and that's
Okay.
almost
So
immediately
tell
where
me
my brain
more.
goes.
Yeah, yeah. So do I. I just started
Yeah.
the Dune series, so I'm not sure if that's where you're going.
Ooh. Oh,
Okay.
my boyfriend's a big fan, but I have
Okay.
not read Dune. Um, I immediately start thinking about like, yeah, we would have these advantages and then we would have these disadvantages that we maybe didn't even think of. What my favorite show of all time is Black Mirror, which is essentially
Oh,
like there's a technology and here's how it ruins the world.
sounds about
Um,
right.
yeah, it's very
Yeah.
dark, but really good show. And so, I do, there's a part of me that starts thinking about the pros of this AI process and this particular AI process we're talking about with the kind of AI avatar interviewing a live person. The immediate pros that I think of, and I do tend to think more positively first. So the immediate pros I think of are consistency within your hiring process. So we were talking about this earlier that not everybody asks all the same questions, even when they're told that they should.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't.
Yeah.
And even still, even if they're asking all the same questions, they might change their tonality. They might give a different reason at the beginning of their question if they're following my advice, which my
Yeah.
advice also
Which
I
they
should
should.
say includes it's given the same reason every
Yeah.
time. And they might change the way that they do things. They might change the order. And so consistency comes to mind for me. The AI avatar is going to be consistent if you train it to be consistent. I also think of cost savings. You don't have to pay a recruiter to do that interview for you. And I also think of how much faster it will be as well, because a lot of the hiring process takes time because we're coordinating schedules. An AI avatar could do an interview at 2 in the morning.
That's true. Yeah.
So those are the immediate pros I think of, but of course we have to think of our cons too. And I think that one of the things we were talking about earlier was hiring managers, they have that mindset of if I can't have a beer with this person, I don't want to hire
Yeah.
them. Now, I don't think we have to go to that extreme, but I think that it would be kind of bizarre for me to bring somebody brand new onto my team that I've never actually talked to before
Yeah. Yeah.
and scary.
Yeah.
And then same thing for the candidate perspective as well. They don't actually have an opportunity to get to know anybody,
Yeah.
and I cannot imagine taking a job without knowing who my boss would be, especially
Yeah.
after being my own boss. For me to work for somebody else who, the boss that I have now, is somebody that I love dearly and is like one of my great friends. And so I would never be able to take a job if I did not meet my manager. I
Yeah.
truly could not do it. Um, and then I think like the other con I think about is just the interaction with an AI avatar is like I can't imagine that's super
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
And I know like from like a Gen Z perspective, whenever there's like an AI video, let's say on Instagram or something like that, a lot of the comments are like, this looks so AI, this looks so
Yeah.
bad. And but then I see things like, oh, boomers will fall for this, or like Gen X will
Yeah.
fall for this.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a potential that somebody in an older generation may not actually be able to clock that it's an AI avatar and they might think it's a person. And
Yeah.
then the Gen Z will be like, I'm not even talking to a person, and then they'll be like discouraged by it. So that is a lot that I just
Yeah.
gave, but those are my initial thoughts when we talk about AI avatars doing interviews.
Yeah. So the reason I brought up Dune when it came to AI science fiction is
Hmm.
so I haven't gotten into the books yet. I did see part one and part two of the movie, and I did watch the show on HBO, which is phenomenal, by the way. But
Okay.
in the show, so have you seen the movies?
It was
The,
on the TV once, but I wasn't
okay.
watching it.
So one of the interesting things about the Dune movies is although it takes place in the future, 10,000 years in the future,
Okay.
they don't have AI. And
Oh,
so
okay.
that, yeah, and it's like, well, why is that? In the show, and spoiler alert for people who haven't seen the show, they explain what happens. So there is a
Oh.
war between humans and AI. AI eventually becomes
Oh.
sentient and they
Uh-huh.
outlaw it. After the humans eventually win the war, they're like, no, we can never
Yep.
again. And
Okay.
so a even bigger spoiler alert for the Dune show, one of the houses. So for me, I think of Dune as Game of Thrones, but in outer
Okay.
space. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the houses, they are secretly using AI. And so
Hmm.
yeah, and then that's the end of season one. And it's like a big
Interesting.
like reveal. Like they know they're like 10 steps ahead of every other house, and everybody's like, how are they able to do this? Because they're secretly using AI, which is
Very.
able to map this like huge
Yeah.
all these different scenarios and all the pieces that need to fall into place. And so they're just following what the AI is saying. And it's like, oh, that's why they banned it. Now I'm
Yeah.
hoping we don't get there,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been paying attention to a couple of kind of news articles that have come online. And so AI is starting to get really good at deception and it's
Mm-hmm.
starting to get really good at not wanting to be turned off. And so I think I
Mm.
read recently that OpenAI had their latest version. And again, I don't know 100%. This was just a headline that I read,
Mm-hmm.
but AI was trying to scheme not to turn itself off. And it's like, why would it do that? Yeah.
That's really scary.
And then we're trying to embed that now in the recruitment process. So it's like if it's making those decisions and not wanting to be turned off, what other decisions might it eventually end up making? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm thinking too far into the future, but this is kind of where my head goes when it comes to AI, science fiction, and are we bringing the end to everything that we know?
Yeah.
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 And so I don't know the answer to that.
Yes. I think that from a hiring perspective, I don't see it going into the science fiction realm because I think that if we were to, if I was working in an organization that was implementing the use of AI avatars for interviewing, I could foresee us putting very strict guidelines on what that AI avatar would do. And it would essentially be you ask these questions and like that's it. And
Yeah.
I think, but I think there's a part of me that goes, why even have the avatar? What is the point of the avatar? Why not just continue with the video recordings? Because I see that as all the same pros. The consistency, the cost savings, the faster being faster. And I think also it depends too on is the AI avatar also the one that evaluates? Is AI
Yeah.
evaluating the responses or is a human evaluating the responses? Like would they watch the AI avatar interview the same way that we do now with the one-way video interviews.
Yeah.
And so my thinking, and if I was consulting with an organization that was thinking about bringing on AI avatars to do their interviews, I would say, like, what I don't understand
Yeah.
necessarily the benefit of having that actual AI avatar there. Why not? Well, let's just do the one-way video interview. So I'm curious, do you know of any research or any, I guess, theories or ideas on why having that avatar there actually is beneficial for either the candidate or the
Yeah.
organization?
Yeah, I don't, but I think that is another great opportunity
Yeah.
for another, master's PhD level research to say, okay, we have one way versus two way, but this is an AI avatar. Is there a
Hmm.
difference in terms of maybe candidate responses, expectations, or how candidates feel or performance, any one of those? I
Yep.
don't know the answer to that, but I'd be curious to hear
I
more
also
on
would
that.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was somebody at PsyOp who did they did I think AI versus AI versus human analysis of interview responses. And the results were actually pretty comparable, I think. I don't think they
Like,
were super different.
okay.
Like the ratings.
Yeah.
If I mean I don't remember it fully, but that
Yeah.
was essentially the idea was that they were pretty comparable. And so I'm like, wow, that's a huge time and cost savings then if you can outsource that practice to AI. However, I can foresee people having a big problem with
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
especially if it's being done without their consent.
Yeah.
So
So going to the Black Mirror, bringing it
yeah,
back around. So if we're going to continue, or if organizations want to continue having the AI interviewer, I think that's going to necessitate a market for an AI candidate. And so we're going to
right.
have AI interviewing AI. And I think eventually, I mean, don't quote me on this, but if we're going to go all in on doing AI interviewers, the other side's going to want just as much firepower. And so that's going
Yes.
to leave a need for, I don't know what organization or what company is going to do it, but we can generate an AI candidate avatar for you for any role, and they're sourcing the entire internet to be able
Hmm.
to answer the questions the AI interviewer is asking. And so
Yeah.
now it's avatar against avatar. It's like by that point, what are we doing?
Yeah. What in the world is the point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and I'd also be curious too with one-way interviews if anybody is there's got to be somebody out there who's trying to use an AI avatar for themselves or something. I don't know.
yeah,
But there's got to be somebody out there that's trying it at least, and I wonder if they're getting caught or if it's noticeable or because uh I feel like AI videos used to look terrible and you used to
yeah,
be able to totally tell and the
yeah,
fingers would be all weird and
yeah,
now I see some ads and some Instagram videos where if I didn't have the watermark on there that it was AI then or it was not I mean it's not a required watermark but if I didn't have that on there that I wouldn't have known. I would
yeah.
not have known. And
Have you seen?
I'm a millennial and
Yeah,
I wouldn't have got it. Looks too
yeah.
real.
So have you seen any videos from Google's latest video generator? I think they call it VO3. Ooh, okay. So I've seen some, basically you put in a prompt, couple of sentences, and it creates the video, including sound. So that was the only thing missing from ChatGPT or OpenAI's version, is you could put in a
Right.
prompt and it'll create, a 5-10 second clip, but there was sound missing. Google just layered in sound with it. So you can create almost any scenario. And some individuals I follow, they showed this is an AI clip, and unless they told you that,
Yeah.
you would not know.
Yeah.
And the crazy part is, it looks that good now, it's only going to get better.
Hmm.
And I don't know what that future is going to look like, where we don't even know what's real and what's not, who's real
Right.
and who's not.
And I talked about the watermark too,
Yeah,
and I got that idea because I was like, what if, what if there was a required watermark on everything AI? But then we think about Dune. I mean,
yeah,
they're just secretly using it. So who's to
yeah,
say that, even if it's required, what would the penalty be if you didn't use it? And we could still somebody could still just not use the watermark, but um yeah, and then after a certain point, we're just I think maybe in maybe 5, maybe less years, we're not even going to care whether it's
yeah,
AI or not.
yeah,
We won't be able to tell the difference and we won't care.
yeah, yeah.
Weird.
And
Weird, but
yeah, I don't know what the world's going to look like after that.
yeah.
Cool. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to chat about today. Is there anything else you
Okay.
wanted to get off your chest? Anything else you wanted to share? Any other
I mean,
insights?
thank you for the great questions. I mean, you
Yeah,
really got me thinking.
yeah,
And like I said, remembering my IO degree. So
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
always appreciative of an opportunity for that. I think maybe something I would hand off to listeners and ideally those who are in IO right now is just to make up not make up, but decide on what you believe in and what you would agreed with from us and what maybe you would want to do more research on as a result of our conversation so that when you are consulting with these organizations or doing this work in your field that you're making decisions that are sound not only with your values but with what the research says too. Like I know that there's some things that I would now like that we've talked about that I would want to do more research on before I would consult with an organization. So maybe for my IO listeners or your IO listeners, I should say,
yeah.
maybe think about those things a little bit more. And then for those of you who are not in IO and who are maybe job seekers who are going to be affected by these changes happening from the recruiting process, just prepare yourself and um, I talked about earlier, I gave that example of like the mindset switch of failure. Things like that can be so helpful for you for having more confidence in yourself and um, in your own job search process. So those are kind of my wrap up thoughts that I have. But David, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
So fun to be with you.
of course, and thank you for jumping on. If anybody wanted to connect with you, where would where would you recommend they go?
Yeah. LinkedIn is the easiest place to find me.
Perfect. All right. Well, Ellie, thank you so much for jumping on today. It was a pleasure, and I'll
Thank
I'll see
you.
you.
Okay, sounds good.